sky. It's a bird. It's a plane. It's Superman.
This is Dan Jurgen.
This is Jason J. Lewis, the voice of Superman on Justice League Action.
This is Mark Wade, writer of Superman Birthright.
And you're listening to the Krypton Report.
The Krypton Report podcast is dedicated to all things Superman, Supergirl, and the planet Krypton. We discuss movies, TV, game, comics, and all things DC. So join me, Tyler, with my co-host James and Jania.
Welcome to 2222, part 2 of the Two-Face two-part episode. And today I'm joined by not one, but two ghosts. The two better halves, other halves. I had Jania, and now I have these two. So I have to bring the other two of my personality. I have with me Mr. James Cole.
Hey, Tyler. What's up? There's a lot of twos.
Yes.
You know, the only date that would be better is in 200 years when it's 2/22/22/22. So we'll talk again in 200 years.
So should we just record a podcast and then, like, see if Lipson will let me sync it for 200 years from now? Be like, we're receiving this. This is our
Right.
Two-Face podcast. And then the other two
That
to our
would
two
actually be amazing.
is
If
Bryan.
if you could set it to upload again in 200 years. And,
Hey, Bryan.
and people are like, oh my God, what is this from 200 years ago?
They're like, what are podcasts?
Yeah, right. What are
We just beam
podcasts?
it directly into our brain.
No, 200 years from now. Oh no.
We'll be like the fat people in
Person's
the
helpful
floaty
podcast.
chairs in Wall-E.
See, I don't see
200 years.
you know what I foresee the future being like? Mad Max. Because we're just going to screw ourselves over and just become a post-apocalyptic world. Like, the electric's going to go out. We're going to have to go back to being primitive people. That's really where I see us in like 200 years.
Oh yeah, primitive people. We're either going to be primitives or we're going to be in a war against the machines.
Dude, we are in a war against the machines. We just don't realize it. And it's one of those, like, we don't see it, and then all of a sudden we're like, oh, it was so obvious. I mean, come on. All right. I can't even say it because I don't want to spoil anything for anybody. But for all of our listeners, little side note, if you saw the last 2 episodes of the Book of Boba Fett, and you know what I'm talking about, that's computer technology on a whole new level, and it's scary.
I haven't watched the Book of Boba Fett yet.
I mean, it's been spoiled like, you know,
Hasn't been spoiled for me.
probably has.
Nope, not yet.
No, luckily
It was really
I haven't
good.
seen anything. I haven't read anything on anything Star Wars coming up. The only thing I've seen is Kenobi coming out, and I'm pretty sure I'll watch Book of Boba Fett before May when Kenobi comes out.
Yeah.
Kenobi's coming out?
Dude, they announced that back on,
May 25th.
yeah, they announced that
I know.
also.
I was speaking.
I was say back when they did everything's coming to Disney Plus in
200 years
2022. Yeah, 200 years ago. But back to Two-Face. So this,
hi, I'm Bryan.
hi, this is Bryan.
Hi, Brian.
Hi, James.
His name's not Ernie anymore. This is Bryan.
The life of Brian.
Ice. I'm ice.
This is Ice. So this episode is going to focus on Two-Face in the comics. Last time, Jania and I discussed Two-Face in other media and how he's been depicted, and we had a long conversation. And, you know, part of that was the fact, and this is something I was going to bring up, with the comics is Two-Face to me is Batman's one of his greatest villains.
Absolutely.
Because not only is he a Batman villain, he's a Bruce Wayne villain. And it seems like in the comics, he's just kind of disappeared. Like, no one's done a really great Two-Face story in a long time. And I will ask this. I'm not saying this with a definitive answer, but is there a great Two-Face story?
Yes.
And that's part of what we're going to be discussing today. So,
Yeah, I think there's a few great Two-Face stories, but there's not good follow-up, if that makes sense. Like
Like he comes out of the woodwork, does something, and then like he's gone again.
Yeah.
Like no lasting effects.
Yeah.
yes, like they'll do a story, Two-Face will be featured, and that's kind of it. And he just kind of goes back into hiding to show up a little bit later, and then that's it. And we
Right.
might see him again, but we'll be like, oh yeah, Two-Face. And it's kind of weird. And
I mean,
I
which is probably why I think like the animated series story is probably one of the more popular, the better stories, just because of the fact that he has a personal connection. You know, there's a human element to that with his wife, his connection to Bruce Wayne, and his personal connection with the job and everything else.
yeah, absolutely. You know, I think pre-crisis. Well, we'll get into it.
So let's
But,
jump in
yeah.
first. Let's just start with the history. Who created Two-Face? That's a good question.
Well, Two-Face.
That is a good question.
It was created none other than by Bill Finger, with probably very little help from Bob Kane.
Darn right, is created by Bill Finger.
First appeared in Detective Comics number 62 or 66,
66.
which is divisible by 2.
Then,
August 1942.
but do your notes say anything else? So his first appearance in Batman's Detective Comics 66, it was actually a 2-part story. So in 66, it starts it. 67 was actually a Penguin story, and 68 was the second part of that story.
That's kind of cool. They kept it on an even number, though.
Yes. The even number is a cool like little way of connecting Two-Face and his story.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it has to have been on purpose.
Yeah. Why else would you do it? But
Exactly.
Bryan, being the magnificent history reader that he is,
I'm okay.
is gonna fill us in a little bit on some pre-crisis Two-Face.
And I'll do a little bit of post-crisis in terms of his relationship with Renee Montoya.
And then we're going to talk about stories that we've read, stories that we think is prominent, and some other things. So, Bryan, go ahead and take it away.
So, some interesting things that I picked up. So, when Two-Face was first introduced, his name was actually not Harvey Dent. His name was Harvey Apollo, as a nickname, Kent. Yes, that's Kent, as in Clark Kent, as in John Kent, as in we might want to change his last name because of the association with Superman Kent.
Which made sense because I hate when you're creating fiction, okay, don't give people the same name. Just going to say that and back off.
Absolutely. And he was called Apollo because he was such a handsome fella. Everybody adored him. And he was the district attorney. And in the first couple panel of the first issue, he actually is a district attorney prosecuting Sal Maroni. And as his first witness, and wasting no time in the case against Sal Maroni, he calls upon Batman. So
Nice.
it's just kind of like in Batman Forever, if you will. Where,
Okay. Can we just pause for a second? Because I've never thought of it like this, but a lot of people have mentioned it. The idea in Batman Forever was Batman just sitting like in the crowd, because the way he comes jumping through the witness stand and everything, it kind of feels like maybe had just been sitting in the crowd and then like went into action. I don't know. Just a thought.
Yeah, that's
Well,
the way it seems in that movie. It's like Batman sitting in the courtroom in the broad daylight with everybody just chilling in costume in his suit.
well, if they want to elaborate a little bit more, Batman is called in as a witness to the busting of Sal Maroni, and Sal, in his frustration, throws acid at Harvey Dent. He throws sulfuric acid at Harvey Dent. Batman deflects it with his glove, and half of it splashes Harvey's face. Now, in the first comic, you do not see the scarring of Harvey's face until a little later. And the whole entire time, his suit is actually orange. The whole time. Until they take the bandages off. And he sees his scarred face the first time. Then, all of a sudden, half the suit becomes purple with his green face.
Which is interesting.
Yes. Now,
Isn't that
good.
isn't that the design they used for Two-Face in Batman versus Two-Face, the last
Yes.
Adam West animated movie?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, Two-Face's face was originally scarred green, and Bill Finger got his inspiration for Two-Face from the 1931 movie of Jekyll and Hyde. So Two-Face is seriously based off of Jekyll and Hyde. Actually, in the first panel of the Detective Comics 66, you see Two-Face reading The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Oh, that's pretty
Makes
cool.
sense.
Now, Two-Face, when he was introduced, he was deemed a little bit too scary of a character.
That's why he wasn't ever used in 66, this TV series,
That is correct, sir.
which is bullcrap.
So there are some reports that Bill Finger and Bob Kane actually thought he was a little too scary that they created. So his other appearances in Pre-Crisis, until Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams got the job, his other appearances are actually by fakers, people posing as Two-Face. So that was somewhat interesting. So I want to get your thoughts on this, guys. So what do you think? So originally the coin that Two-Face has was actually Sal Maroni's coin. So Sal Maroni had a two-headed coin, and Harvey had this as evidence. And when he sees his face like that, that's what makes him kind of go a little crazy. And then he goes home to Gilda, his wife, and Gilda is actually an artist. She is a sculptor, and she would always sculpt his face because he was like Adonis. He was gorgeous. Gilda's reaction.
He was like James.
Well, that's what I call him, Adonis. But Gilda's reaction is so crazy, and the reaction to people that see his scarred face around town, that that's part of what makes Harvey go nuts, is Gilda's reaction. And now Batman goes to him and says, there is a plastic surgeon named Dr. Eckhart who could fix you.
Do you think about the future?
You ain't got no
I knew you were
future,
going to say
Jack.
that. I knew you were going to say that.
That's right.
But Eckhart is like a leading plastic surgeon that actually got thrown into a concentration camp. Because remember, this was the early 1940s or mid 1940s, where World War, this is 1942, right? Yeah, 1942. So World War II was going on. So they used it as part of the story of why Harvey couldn't get fixed. Because the one surgeon that could do it was in a concentration camp. Now, later on in the comics, he will fix Harvey. And we won't see Harvey till much later into the 70s, kind of with the return of Joker and the more serious tone as the Bronze Age begins. We don't really see him too much. But he takes Sal Maroon's coin and scars it. And in that first adventure, this is really interesting. In the first adventure, he actually, if he flips it on the good side to make decisions, he actually acts as like a Robin Hood. Like he'll still do a crime and steal money, but like he'll pay people's mortgages. He donates it to charity. And people think he's like a normal Robin Hood, and he's actually a good guy.
That would be a really fun to explore more, like you just said, where he flips the coin about doing the crime, and then flips the coin what to do with the money.
Yeah,
and he's both a hero and a villain, even to himself.
Yes.
Well, what is it?
What is it? Really buy into that.
I mean, like, what would it would be interesting if the story, because, like, he flips it, like, if he should shoot somebody, but, like, if he flips it one way, Two-Face makes the call. If he flips it the other way, Harvey makes the call. So, like, he would be doing horrible things, robberies, killing people, whatever, and then on the other side, he'd be helping people, rescuing people, saving people, doing something that Harvey Dent would do.
It would be interesting. Now, let me ask you guys a question. Do you consider it Harvey as one side and Two-Face as the other? Or is it Harvey on one side and then Two-Face is what they are when they're together? Like, Two-Face is the name given to both of them. Because I don't think of it as like Two-Face is the burnt side. Like, Two-Face is what's happened to Harvey. So it's like Two-Face is a label that's on him for both sides of himself. And they try to distinguish, that and talk to Harvey. And he doesn't recognize himself as Harvey. Like, he is Two-Face because he is of two minds.
I think of it as there's Harvey, then there's Big Bad Harv. Then there's Two-Face is just the symbolic name of the struggle.
Right. See, I don't even know if I really like the Big Bad Harv. Like, I don't mind.
Or just Harv.
I don't mind, like, the idea of him having, like, anger issues and problems and a temper. But, like, on the animated series, I didn't like the idea of having a complete alternate personality.
Okay.
And then the scarring brought the alternate personality out into one side of him. I don't know. I really like the idea of him being fixated as of two minds of right and wrong and losing his ability to make decisions on what is right and what is wrong. So he has to follow the coin.
There you go.
Like, more so than being this personality versus this personality so I don't know. It's an interesting perception, but I just wanted to ask that as far as what we call him.
What do you think there, James?
Yeah, the coin.
He takes the Delmar approach. He's like, I'm with you fellers.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. I mean, you said most of that really well. Like, I don't have much to add
Batman
exactly to that.
I mean, Two-Face is my favorite Batman villain. And he doesn't get as much. He's like a well-known Batman villain. But then if you ask why or where, people are like, movies?
Right. I mean, I haven't read too many too many comics with him. Like he certainly hasn't been in any current run that I've read.
And that's Bryan already mentioned that. Like that's a shame. Like it seems like he's been very shelved recently.
Yeah, he's been one of the top villains for Batman. I've always known that Two-Face was one of his top rogues, you know. And they've done some good stories with him that I've seen, you know, because the only prevalent stories that I've read with him in them is Arkham Asylum, Year One, Long Halloween. He's not even really in Year One that much.
No, he's just Harvey Dent.
Yeah.
You know what was okay? So, just pointing this out while we're talking, because I didn't think about this when Janine and I talked. It didn't even dawn on me that the cartoon series of The Batman doesn't even have Two-Face in it.
I never finished it yet. So
I had, but then like I was going back through and checking, and he's not there.
Was this Gotham?
No,
Gotham had him.
Gotham
like 2
had
seconds.
Gotham had Harvey Dent in like the first season, then he came back for one episode in like the second season. Then he disappeared for the rest of the show.
Yeah.
He's like the one Batman villain that didn't become a full villain by the end of the series.
But we do agree that shouldn't. We should have seen a little bit more of Harvey Dent. Like if you're going to introduce Harvey Dent when Bruce is a freaking child, then at least have some more of him. But he turns to Two-Face while Batman's Batman. But like I don't know, they blew it. I don't think they should have showed Harvey at all. They kind of blew it.
What in Gotham?
In that Gotham show, they shouldn't have showed Harvey at all.
Dude, your whole statement you just said is the entire series. They shouldn't have fill in the blank.
Pretty much. Yeah, I mean, you know, speaking on that,
they didn't show Two-Face though.
He could have just been an upcoming lawyer, you know, like fresh out of law school.
Student.
Yeah,
he should have been a law student, or he should have been. You know what? He should have been in college in pre-law.
No, he should have been a student with Bruce.
I mean, that's the ultimate yes. But we digress. The other thing was, in all of those connected animated film series that we reviewed, Two-Face is only shown in a cameo in Arkham. He's never an actual character. So he hasn't really gotten recently anything grand. The closest thing is, since we're still in pre-crisis, was the Batman versus Two-Face animated film. But what's some other big pre-crisis Two-Face stuff, Bryan?
So one thing I want to point out here. So there isn't much that's pre-crisis Two-Face that actually is Two-Face because of the imposter stories.
That's crazy.
So you do get him to come back a little bit with Denny O'Neil and such, but he's still sparingly. Like he does come back for a little bit. Now originally in pre-crisis, in terms of Jason Todd's origin, Jason Todd's origin, he was the one that killed Jason's parents. That was part of it. Like Jason's dad was kind of pre-crisis. Jason's parents were actually part of the circus.
You mean when it was just cut and paste Dick Grayson?
Absolutely cut and paste, without a doubt. Wow. Yes.
But what make him blonde? Wasn't that like the only difference?
I think yes, if I remember right, pre-crisis, Jason. No, because Jason, he dyed his hair.
He did dye his hair.
He dyed his hair to be.
I can't remember if that's when the red or the blonde was, and then they had him dye his.
No,
hair.
it was red. No, I think it was red hair.
Okay, it was always red then.
Yeah, and then he dyed it black. But post-crisis they changed that.
Yeah.
And now I don't know if you would put Robin Year One. Yeah, no, you put that post-crisis as well. But in a pre-crisis story, and I couldn't find in my notes what story it was, but Two-Face, Batman admits that Two-Face is his most feared villain. Two-Face is the villain that Batman is most afraid of. Even more than Joker. Even more than Ra's al Ghul. Two-Face is the one he fears the most. Now let's talk post-crisis, because that's where a lot of Two-Face stuff happens. Post-crisis.
All right. So I think first off, if we're heading post-crisis, the most famous is Long Halloween.
No doubt.
And yes, that's a Harvey Dent Two-Face story,
Mhm.
but it's also all the other characters are involved. Like all the other villains are in there as well. Now I read Two-Face Year One. If you've never read it, you should read Long Halloween, then that book, because
Well played.
that book is like the companion to Long Halloween. It's like every time, like if say we're here right now, okay, and Harvey, say you're Harvey, Bryan, and you walk out the door,
I would love to be Harvey.
and I'm talking to James, and then you walk back in. When you walk out that door, what goes out there, that's Year One. So it's like all this stuff that's like off to the side that we don't see in Long Halloween is what's in Year One. So it's very much a companion piece to it.
Yeah,
Two
there's a
Dark
nice scene where Commissioner
Not
Loeb
really.
comes in, where Commissioner, I think it was
So,
Loeb, he calls him Gil.
yeah,
I
it
think
was a
it's Loeb.
very.
He comes
It was
in
a
and
very.
he's, you're going after a businessman, and points to the board, and they've got Joker and Scarecrow, and then then Holiday with a question mark.
Yeah.
Like, who's
So
the Holiday
it's a
killer?
very fun read to butt up with Long Halloween. So I read that one. Post Crisis is usually where most of my Harvey Dent Two-Face comic knowledge comes from because of Long Halloween, and then I recently reread the Face story, which was interesting and good because it takes place in Batman and in Detective. And I think it's like the real story, like the heaviest part of the story. I think it's 6 issues.
This is the post Infinite Crisis, right?
Yeah, because that's the part of the 1 year later.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm almost there in my DC history reading.
it's interesting because it's like you read, I think, Detective, and it's very strong with the storyline, and then the Batman issue connects and it's part of it, but it's very light. And you really feel like the heart of that story is the 3 detective issues. And it's kind of like, it reminds me kind of like Hush, with the way the story's like this mystery, but there's certain beats in it that have been repeated in other Two-Face stories.
Well, at the start of the story, so jumping ahead a little bit. So
We're all over the place. Just jump.
we are. Read a comic, people. It's awesome. But so around that time, Two-Face is cured, supposedly. So they kind of brought in a pre-crisis story of him finally getting the surgery, and then kind of fading away. To like kind of brought that back, where he gets a surgery for Tommy Elliott to use as a pawn against Batman.
And didn't they do the surgery healing in Dark Knight Returns also?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, they fixed his face and then said they fixed his mind, but they made it worse.
So shattered. It's either he goes in Dark Knight Returns, he looks in the mirror and he sees his face is completely scarred.
Yeah, both sides scarred.
And then in every other place, it's like he just recuts his face and does it over again because he just he's forever altered. Like
always. So, I want to touch on one last thing for myself. So, what do you guys think about Gilda and Harvey's relationships with Harvey's relationship with Gilda, and just like really any possible female, comic wise? Like think Dark Halloween and everything. Like, what do you think about this? Because things kind of changed in the 90s.
I don't know, because I almost see Harvey as being kind of. I guess I always liked the idea that Harvey's very much not a player, but has trouble settling down, even if there is someone that he loves. Because even as Harvey, like, we see little bits about where he has problems with decisions. And in the comics, like, of course, Gilda was big in the Long Halloween, but then like every other interpretation I've seen in other media, like, she is gone.
Yeah.
Like, she wasn't in the animated series. That's why, because of course I saw the animated series before I read Long Halloween. So of course, when I did read it, I was like, who's this? Because there was a woman, Grace, in the animated series.
And don't forget Poison Ivy.
And Poison Ivy. And then if we look, and then in the movie, we had Sugar and Spice and Batman Forever.
Everything was nice.
And then we had Maggie Gyllenhaal, Rachel, and
Rachel,
The Dark Knight. So, Gilda hasn't got her fair representation. And then we had a twist to like the Gilda story in the Long Halloween film.
Yes.
So I don't know. Like, I like the idea that Harvey, like, has connection and has a desire, to be settled down, but has a hard time, and he has conflict about it, I like the idea that his whole life is built on conflict, where he's not sure. When he's in the courtroom, he has absolutes.
Yes.
But when he has his personal life, he has issues. So when the scars hit him, it's like the perfect out for him to just break and accept life as pure chaos.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see, like, just from different, like I've seen him married, obviously, with that story, with that run, but I know in other stories and other mediums, he's, as you said, like a player. I think less settling down, more of he's kind of obsessed with the job, and with his psychological problems, seeing therapists and stuff. I mean, and his decision making, I think it would be easier to see him, kind of bouncing around from person to person.
Mm-hmm. I'm just kind of thinking here, like, the more I look into it, like, there really has not been a really good Two-Face story in a long time.
So
now,
I mean, I haven't read so many. So, like, just one of my, and you actually haven't read it yet, and partially because of the artwork, and I don't blame you there. But Batman Arkham Asylum.
It's not just the art, White. It's the lettering.
The lettering, yeah.
Hard to read.
The interpretation of Harvey Dent is actually pretty it's an extreme version of him. Like, so what the doctors at Arkham do for him or do to him is they try to break him of the choice of flipping the coin to make a decision. So they continually increase his choices by using different methods. Like they introduce a dice to him, so that way he has more. So that way he has up to like 6 choices to make, and so on. And they talk about how they give him tarot cards, and just they're trying to increase that so that way he's able to make a decision on his own without something telling him what to do. And instead of helping him, it made more problems for him. He couldn't make a decision. There were too many choices. Like in the book, it even says that he couldn't use the bathroom. He couldn't make the choice to use the bathroom because there were so many different choices for him to make. And what's really cool is Batman, like all of the rogues in Arkham Asylum have Batman cornered, and they leave it up to Two-Face to what they're going to do to him. And Batman gives him his coin back to make the choice. And he flips the coin, and the coin lands on Death, but he actually lets Batman go.
That makes sense. I do want to read it because I did just receive a copy of it. So I am excited to read it,
Yeah. Well, it's the thing is, it's not one of those stories because, it's Grant Morrison, right? So it can be anything. Right. Like, it's not one of those stories where Grant Morrison is writing Final Crisis and he's talking about the orrery and the freaking bleed and the miracle machine and the fourth world and like all this like mind-bending dimensional time and space stuff that he does. This is Batman and his rogues gallery, like a mental dive into those characters. And that's why it's interesting. That's why it's so different. And then of course that artwork.
Whew. Yes. I'm trying to think of. Bryan just had to step out for a second.
Oh, see, he's all our knowledge. What the heck? Like, now we got nothing.
So, yeah, we'll just wait for Bryan to come back. But anyways, so in comics, there was more recently, like if we want to talk about anything substantial recently, was in Jeff Johns' conclusion to his Batman Earth 1 books. We got the third volume had Harvey Dent in it, but the twist was that he had a twin sister. And the twin sister actually like absorbs the personality of Harvey. And that becomes, when she's hurt and scarred, that becomes her Two-Face persona. So one side is her, and then the other side is Harvey as the bad side.
Yeah, those Earth 1 books are pretty good.
So that was probably the biggest. That's probably the biggest Two-Face story to come out like more recently.
Yeah, and the only issue I have with that is it's been a while since I've read Earth 1. So I mean, before we got on, I was asking you about Earth 1 because I knew there was the woman in it. I couldn't remember if it was his wife or his sister.
It's his twin sister because she has an issue with Bruce Wayne. And because he has an issue because Bruce Wayne had a crush on his sister.
Okay.
And that's like the big kind of crux, so that when the Harvey as the Two-Face other side takes over, that's where like all this animosity comes from, is he hates that Bruce had a crush on his sister.
Oh.
So I'm gonna pause. Hey, there's Big Bad Bry. Welcome back, Big Bad Bry. So Brian, before we got on mic, you had shared with me
What do you want?
About the Mad Hatter that you'd pulled up and the revelation you had about Two-Face.
You're so handsome.
Thank you.
Oh, hey,
Appreciate
yeah,
that.
yeah, dude. This was awesome.
So yeah, this is pretty dope.
So, in my history of DC Comics reading, so I just want to point out something really cool.
Okay.
Well, I thought it was interesting. For all you listeners out there, and you guys too, you got to read Gotham Central by Ed Brubaker and Greg Rucka.
Okay.
You have to read this series. It is amazing. It is what the Gotham show was supposed to be.
It was.
And what the HBO Gotham show might be.
Hopefully.
That was the original pitch, was to be like Gotham Central, and they're like,
It is so good.
no, we're gonna do this.
So, between Brubaker and Rucka, if I said his name right, I hope I did.
I think
Or
so.
Whatever.
It sounded like you said both of them right.
Okay. So they split the writing duties. One writes the day shift of Gotham Central. One writes the night shift.
That's cool.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
It's so good. The first story is basically about someone on the night shift's partner dying as they investigate a kidnapping of a child. I won't get in more into that, but it ends with a confrontation between a detective that lost his partner and Batman. And basically, he says to Batman that we're the police. I just want you to know that we solved this. We took care of it. Not you, us. And Batman's like, that's the way it's supposed to be.
Batman's like, good.
He's like,
doing your
good.
job.
Yeah, right. Like, it's just so good. So, in one of the stories that I just read, that I think it goes from, I apologize, guys. It goes from, I think, issue 5 to 10.
Okay.
But in it dwells on Renee Montoya.
Yes, that was the other thing I wanted you to talk about.
So it kind of starts in no man's land, this somewhat of a obsession by Two-Face of Renee Montoya. So if you guys don't know the story, No Man's Land, basically it's one of the most popular Batman stories of all time. It takes place in the 90s, and basically a giant earthquake goes through Gotham, and it shatters like everything. It shatters people's perceptions of Gotham, people's hope that Gotham can be better. It destroys the whole entire city, and the U.S. government basically says this earthquake is too big. We're going to seal it off from the country, and you're on your own. At the beginning of this, after this earthquake, Bruce Wayne is trying to get funding for the government, and he can't win. And Batman just leaves for basically almost a year as he tries to figure out kind of what to do, because this is an enemy that Batman's never faced. It's not a physical enemy. It's just natural disaster. So in the midst of
He's
this,
like, oh, I can't punch this?
Yeah, precisely. So Gordon's kind of left on his own to kind of gather the police around, and Renee is part of that team, and so is Bullock, and Gordon makes a deal with Two-Face to get more weapons. So Penguin kind of has all the weapons, as Penguin is Penguin, and Gordon kind of makes a deal with the devil, so to speak, with Two-Face, using the past relationship with Harvey to kind of acquire more weapons and territory so that his police can win. Well, Harvey kind of wants part of his territory back, and he puts Gordon on trial. And I won't spoil the whole entire story with it. Basically, Gordon says, okay, if you're going to put me on trial, I want Harvey Dent to defend me. So you have the Two-Face, or the evil side of Harvey, persecuting Gordon.
The big bad Bryan.
The big bad Bryan, while Harvey Dent is defending Gordon. And it is in...
what issue number is that?
where it is Detective Comics 739. It's like part 40 of No Man's Land, because No Man's Land was years long.
No Man's Land's crazy, just a side note, because it's one of those stories that so many other stories have cherry-picked.
Yes, so many.
Like The Dark Knight Rises,
Yep.
cherry-picked from it. Gotham, and the last season, cherry-picked from it. It's one of those where it's like, it's so monumental that everyone's like, we're going to take little pieces and ideas from this thing. But
Because it's interesting to have a story where the citizens are kind of on their own, and but it's totally cherry-picked. But in this issue, a Detective Comics 739, the Two-Face personality cracks. Like, he just can't do it. So he's questioning Renee Montoya about her relationship with Gordon and how she respects him as a boss, and who is Gordon's character. And then you have Big Bad Harv saying, no, Gordon's a piece of junk, Gordon let me become this, and Gordon's not as good as you think he is. And eventually, like, the whole entire comic, all the dialogue is kind of split in two. As I'm trying to show Tyler here.
oh, that's cool. I'm pulling it up on my app here.
As it's kind of split in two of who's talking and who's persecuting. It is great work. And this was written by Greg Rucka, who's just awesome. Great Batman writer. And we see him kind of break. And so as you can see in this panel here, there's Harvey on one side, and there's Big Bad Harv on the other, conflicting each other. And Two-Face just gives up, and he breaks down. And he acquits him of his charges. So, but in the midst of this is the first time that Harvey is seeing Renee Montoya stand up to him and challenge him of who he is and who he was. That you were district attorney. You were something. This challenging, this conflict in you can beat it. And this is where he starts to see what he could be in the conflict. So that's the start of it. A few years later, Greg brings it back when he takes over Detective Comics kind of for a good period, and Two-Face starts sending Renee roses and Valentines and all these gifts. Now in Gotham Central, Renee gets framed for murder. Her whole life falls apart. And she gets outed as a lesbian. And you find out, spoiler alert, sorry guys.
Yeah, spoiler alert we all pretty much know now, because that's when we think of Renee Montoya, it seems like that's like the definitive, oh yeah, she's the lesbian detective from Gotham.
Thanks to the portrayer and everything now.
For anybody named Montoya that's listening, I don't know who this guy is next to me.
Dude, that's all they made her on Gotham when she was there. And then they brought the same actress from Gotham to be Renee Montoya on Batwoman. And that's all she's been about since being on Batwoman.
But Renee Montoya is one of my favorite Gotham characters.
She's great in the
Christmas
animated series.
album, and just she's been crapped on in live action. I don't even get me started with the Birds of Prey monstrosity Abomination of God movie. Don't even get me started. And that's part of why I was so mad.
Rosie Perez.
Like, oh my. Anyway, like, so Renee gets outed because Two-Face sneaks into the police station and he posts a picture of her kissing her girlfriend and gets outed. Then he frames her for murder and drug possession. And then he kidnaps her. And his reasoning behind this is, well, you wouldn't answer the phone. No, I'm just kidding. His answer behind this is more psychological. He sees Renee as living two lives.
That's what I was going to say. That's what I was going to say. Like, is it because she has that secret of living two lives, two sides? It's like a parallel.
And she has this constant internal conflict of, hey, I'm a lesbian, and I'm in love with Daria, who's a baker, and that's who I am. And she has a secret, and Harvey, because Renee was kind to Harvey and visited him in prison or in no man's land, and she encouraged him to try to be better, Harvey saw that as kindness, and because Gilda rejected him, in these comics. I mean, in these comics, like, Long Halloween was kind of loosely canon.
Yeah, it's one of those that is loose canon, but everyone takes as canon.
It's total canon, absolutely. But to look at Renee as just kind of living these two lives, it makes you get more mad at the Birds of Prey movie, as I am. But I mean, yeah. So of course, Bruce Wayne steps in and hires a lawyer for Renee, and she gets acquitted, but her life's never the same because now everybody knows that she's a lesbian and she never got to have that moment. And it's actually Maggie Sawyer, who transfers from Metropolis to Gotham during this time, who is also a lesbian character, that tells her that this is a moment in your life where you have to decide what you're going to do with this and how you're going to be. Maggie's awesome. Gotham Central, please read this. But after I read that, I started reading Arkham Living Hell, which is an awesome story. He's confusing me. Sorry,
Jania.
This is written by Dan Slott.
Listen to this. This point he pulled up about that gets pointed out about Two-Face here. It's really interesting.
So this is written by Dan Slott, who's known for a very long run on Spider-Man. Dan is awesome. Dan's actually currently writing Fantastic Four, but we don't talk about Marvel, just like we don't talk about Bruno.
No.
But in issue 2 of the Living Hell story, just to give you a little background about this, Living Hell is basically about a white-collar criminal named the Great White Shark. If you ever heard of him?
Yeah, because he comes back in the face-to-face story.
Oh. Well, that makes it more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So this, canonically, I can't even talk.
Canonically, you got it right.
This takes place before No Man's Land.
Okay.
But basically, Great White Shark is basically he robbed a bunch of people from their pensions. He's a white-collar criminal, and he gets trapped in Arkham Asylum with all the nuts. And he basically pleads insanity so he doesn't have to go to prison too much. And he gets thrown in Arkham Asylum with all the nut cases. So in issue 2, Two-Face is kind of in the rec area and Mad Hatter goes up to him and says this. He says, "Psst, what? I've been thinking, since the right side of your brain controls your left, and your left side controls your right, your good and bad faces are in the wrong places. And try as you might, you'll always be contrawise, a flip side, backwards ass. Since of these two dents, the one that makes sense is through the looking glass. So only when Two-Face looks in the mirror does it make sense. And Two-Face basically flips the crap out and destroys mirrors because he doesn't like looking at mirrors. So, to put this in perspective, the left side of your brain, which is the scarred on the outside side of Harvey Dent, the Two-Face side, so outside scarred, the left side of your brain controls the right side of your body. So the left side is responsible for speaking, reading, writing, listening, grammar, number skills, computation skills, analyzing information, reasoning, logic, sequential thinking, time awareness, and it controls the right side of your body. So this left side that is physically on the outside scarred is controlling that right side that is the Harvey side. Okay?
Uh-huh.
The right side of the body, or the right side of the brain, which is controlling the left side, that is the outside appearance Two-Face. I hope you guys are following me because I know it's hard.
I'm following
without
Gotcha.
visuals in front of you. It deals with organizing information, abstract meaning, context, spatial relationships like map reading or shape recognition, visual information, face recognition, intuition, emotion, imagination, detecting motion, music and art, and controls the left side of your body. So the right side of your brain is your creative side. Your left side is your logic, your reasoning. So it makes you wonder, is the Two-Face side the bad side? Or is it the Harvey side? Because the left side of the brain that was poured acid on it controls that left side, or controls that right side of his body, which is not scarred by anything.
It's kind of like a Hegel's dialectic. You have your, if you think about it, you're going back and forth of just your thesis, antithesis, thesis, antithesis.
Yeah.
And that's how I look at his brain, is like everything's flipped. So it's like almost like it's always dual. It's always. And it's not like it's a complete cut you down the middle kind of scarring. Because I know that I've seen in some comics where the acid got the face, the neck, the hand, and then like even more like there's parts of like his chest and stuff that's burnt also. Then sometimes it's just, the face, the neck, and the hand, and the rest is fine.
Yeah,
but
that makes sense.
The other thing that you had found that you told me was about the other words used for the name of the acid.
Yeah, I found that on my own.
I thought that was pretty cool.
So, in the first appearance of... So, in some stories, I think it's in... It might be in year one? Or it might be... I don't know, but there's some stories where Harvey had an abusive father.
Yeah.
And they kind of get into that.
Christopher Dent or something like that?
Yeah, Christopher Dent. So, and I'm probably butchering this as I try to pronounce it, but the type of acid that was thrown at Harvey was sulfuric acid, which Batman asked if that was vitriol, spelled vitriol. So vitriol also has the definition of cruel or bitter criticism. So literally and figuratively, cruel or bitter criticism is thrown at his face. criticism is thrown at his face, and he splits. His mind splits. Sulfuric acid, but also cruel criticism thrown at him. And what can't Harvey take? Harvey can't take criticism. He can't take someone showing him who he really is, or someone telling him kind of what to do. Like, it has to, his decision making, null and void.
So, in all this talk about Harvey and in comics, I've been thinking,
What are you thinking, homie?
what would be a great story to do now with Harvey? Because one, I'm over the let's cure Harvey storyline. I think the best twist on that was in the animated series where Two-Face had Harvey kidnapped. He pre-planned to have Harvey kidnapped to stop him from being the plastic surgery to being fixed. I'm behind in reading current Batman. I think the last current thing I read was
Welcome to adulthood.
right before the Fear, whatever.
Fear state stuff.
Right
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Fear
got really
State.
just tired of Batman comics and how it just seemed like they kept everything kept escalating, and then the last issue of the story was.
Well, I think you're just kind of butthurt because, Batman's superior to Superman. So
What? Jania? Get the axe? Awesome. All fun makes Jack a dull boy.
I welcome death.
Bring it! Here's Johnny.
I whooped your ass with a kryptonite ring. I whooped your ass in The Dark Knight Returns.
Yeah, and just that one. Don't forget what happened.
You always have to hold back, Clark. Because you're a bitch.
Don't forget what happened when I burned your brain in Hush.
You didn't burn my brain.
Yeah, I did.
Oh, in the Hush movie or something?
No, in the book later when he's sitting there and he tells him to scan it. And
Yeah,
check
because
the
I
brain.
asked you to.
Exactly. You don't
You
know
had to
what
burn the tracker out of me because you're a good friend.
You don't know what else I did while I was in there. Why do you think you can't pee straight anymore?
Here's the thing. I always know what you're going to do, Clark. You don't always know what I'm going to do.
We should just do a whole podcast of this.
Why do you want to kill me?
Where's the trigger?
Right? Where's the trigger?
But no, I'm just thinking
You're
like,
such a bitch.
what would be a really good Two-Face story? And that's the question I leave with everybody. We're an hour in. None of us feel 100%. What would make a good Two-Face story?
That's a $1 million question.
So that's what the thought I want to leave everybody on as we're at 1 hour, 2 minutes, and 24 seconds.
Oh, we should have stopped it at 22 seconds.
Look up in the sky.
I want to invite you to check out the Krypton Report Patreon. For $1 a month, you can hear exclusive content. We have discussions on movies or other comics or stuff that's going on in pop culture. We have guest appearances, and we have plenty of fun times. We also have movie commentaries that we like to do. It's one of our favorite things to do. So check that out. It's just $1 a month. It's chump change, it just helps us keep the podcast going. We're not here to make, money off and get rich. It's just nice to have a little help, to pay the bills here. So $1 a month, come join us on our Patreon. Krypton Report, patreon.com.
And if you want to have a good time, keep listening to the Krypton Report.
If you're enjoying this podcast, here's some of our favorite podcasts to check out. Digging for Kryptonite, The Aspiring Kryptonian, Superman the Animated Podcast, The Last Sons of Krypton, The Geek of Steel, the All-Star Superfan Podcast, It All Comes Back to Superman, and Superboy Legacy, Supergirl Radio, and of course, always hold on to Smallville. Check all those out, enjoy those supercasts, and remember, keep listening. The Krypton Report is a Tears production. We thank you for listening and enjoying, and please support us on our Patreon account, our TeePublic store, and check out our social media. Always remember to look up in the sky.